we shall be for today. So we have been talking about the context uh, by Brookfield and how he looks at this in a critical manner, bringing in the social, political, and cultural context in adult learning. And now the other second arena that we have to look at is the situated cognition or contextual learning. And this theory building related to context where learning takes place is called situated cognition and contextual learning. Coming from educational psychology rather than the social science philosophy that Brookfield picks from, this theory articulates that the particular learning that takes place is a function of three factors in the context where it occurs. And these three factors are the people who are doing the learning in that context, the particular activity that they are using, and then the tools at hand which they use, or the objects that they use for their learning. And these objects are the facilities, what facilitates their learning. Are they using a projector in this mode that we are using right now? I am very sure we could talk of things like internet and whichever gadgets that we are using. I'm using a computer. I am sure Hanat is using a phone. I don't know what Muhammad is using, but those are the tools. So situated learning, we see the people, we see the tools, and then the activity. Now, that makes it even very easy for us to relate in this class. When we talk about the people, we are the people. And in which context are we? We are in a dispersed context. I am at home. Hanat, you must, I don't know. Are you home?
I am home.
You are home. Of course, not my home. And Chigundu is at a hotel. That is our context in which we the people are. And then the activity, we all know the activity we are at. We are trying to discover and go through this introduction of this course by way of an overview lecture. The tools we have mentioned. Now, you can now see, if we can take this as an adult learning situation, then it fits in very well in the explanation and description of situated cognition. So probably this the in this situated cognition, we can see that Lev is considered to be the chief architect of this theory, as we shall see. I think what we are going to do is that we shall be dividing these theories among ourselves so that we do some bit of research and then we share together. But of course, we shall share the materials so that each one of us can access them. Now, the other um, model in context-based learning is the communities of practice. Communities of practice is also another model of adult learning and context-based learning. Now, this one has its roots from the belief that since a major component of understanding learning as a function of the context in which it occurs nearly always involves other people, then the notion of learning communities or communities of practice is a direct outgrowth of this perspective on learning. Because we have mentioned that Brookfield in the first place believed that learning should not be understood in isolation of where it is taking place in terms of the social context. And when we talk about the social context, then we have to recognize that in such situations, there are other stakeholders who are involved. There are other people who form the social context in which we operate and in which learning takes place. So communities of practice are basically groups of people who share a common interest and who learn within the sphere of common interest. And of course, here we are seeing an element of group learning. There is something that brings us together that we should learn or should learn about, and as a community, something that brings us together, and we all belong to several communities of practice. We all belong to several groups of communities of practice, beginning from our families, our workplaces, for those who work, professional associations, neighborhood groups, or even a social website like WhatsApp, Facebook, or maybe WhatsApp may not be as social as Facebook, because Facebook you have everybody there. But of course, with WhatsApp we also now have groups. WhatsApp actually has even started communities, and maybe we are supposed to use this application for communities of practice. Maybe that is something that people need to embrace and take advantage of. So in some communities, we may be quite knowledgeable, and we may be at the top as core givers of counsel and beholders of knowledge to share with others, while in other communities we may take a back seat and a back role, or on the periphery, because we do not understand much and there are others who are ahead of us who guide us. And at this point, I want to pause and just let you, each one of you, to mention which communities of practice you belong to at the moment, that you can identify and say, I belong to this community, and this one, and this, and this one. Because it is also very rare that people like you who are exposed belong to only one community of practice. You definitely belong to several. And I want to allow a reflection on some of those communities of practice that each one of you belongs to, so that it can bring our understanding closer to us. As after that reflection, we continue to mention that the chief architect of communities of practice is could be Wenger, who is often associated with this. And he notes that learning is central to these communities, whether it happens serendipitously or whether it is designed into the social infrastructures, whether it happens spontaneously or incidentally, or whether it is structured in the social infrastructures. And then the concept of learning community comes in. If learning is not only a matter of course in the history of its practice, but at the core of the enterprise. And very quickly, I want to mention a community of practice. For example, if you belong to a research group. There are people who belong to a research group, a group of researchers, and of course, if it is a group of researchers, that means that you deal with research and finding new knowledge to add on to a particular body of knowledge or a particular field. Now, you'd know that nobody at this point would tell you that we are now going to learn. Now we are going to take lessons. Now we are going to pick something new. We are going to look for something new. By belonging to that group, even when the group has just started, it automatically becomes a learning community. Why? Because learning is at the center, is at the core of that enterprise. And the enterprise is research. You cannot do research if you are not ready to learn, because even when you read an article, when you read the literature, you are learning. When you go to the field, you are learning. When you share your proposal, the research or initial findings, you actually learn. You take notes from the comments that you get back. So there are those communities of practice that become learning communities by way of the way they practice their learning. So you can look at those communities of practice that you belong to, that you might have mentioned, that you might have reflected on, and ask yourself, for example, when we are in Red Cross, do we ensure that every after activity there is reflection, we are learning, we are sharing the lessons? When we are writing the reports, are we deriving lessons so that we can inform future actions? So that is to do with the communities of practice as another model of adult learning. The other model that we shall also be looking at is embodied or somatic learning. Now, embodied learning is mainly to do with the use of the body to learn, using our bodies to learn. So our bodies are like learning elements or learning objects or learning aids. So the recent work in the West and growing knowledge of how other cultures think of learning have revealed that learning can be through pathways other than those dominated by our brain. Actually, our body, our emotions, our spirit, and is what we refer to, or what is commonly referred to as holistic learning. These are so important avenues for learning or knowledge construction. And work in holistic learning is coming from educators, psychologists, and neuroscientists who believe that we can learn through our body. And whether or not we acknowledge the body as a site of learning does not matter a lot, because we all experience embodied learning. We all experience embodied learning. We all experience learning through our bodies. And it is noted that the brain itself is a physical organ. That is why if someone is knocked down by a car and it steps on their head, you can actually see the brain. You can see the brain. Ubongo buyise. The brain has splashed out, has exploded. It is a physical part of the body. And we know very well that the brain is the one that runs the show. Because sometimes they may say, okay, the brain is not connecting with your nerves, so you cannot walk. The brain has lost touch with your senses, your sense of smell or sense of touch, and that is why. So the brain connects other parts of the body to learn, and therefore it gives a sense to the fact that even the brain itself is part of the body. So what we have to note here is that the signals that the brain receives which include emotions, how we feel, the intuition, and the implied knowing, the unsaid. All those comprise our learning through our body, for as long as it is about us, for as long as it is about you as an adult, you can use it for your learning. So embodied learning is definitely highly intuitive. There is not a lot of logic in it. It is highly intuitive, and intuitive or tacit knowledge is knowledge that we have all felt, but rarely articulate or rarely bring to the fore, because sometimes people think that it doesn't make a lot of sense. It is this is knowing that we experience rather than what we think about. So it has something to do with experiential learning. You have heard people say there is a way I feel, and I cannot even explain it, but there is a certain way that I feel, and that is in most cases relating to intuition, which is quite difficult to explain for someone to really get. So I just want to say a few things about spirituality and learning. Now moving away from embodied learning, that is using the body, and now we shall also be looking at spirituality and learning. And what I can say about this is that a holistic approach to learning includes also acknowledging the spiritual nature or dimension of human beings. People are spiritual beings, and spirituality should not necessarily infer religion or religious beliefs, much as it is spirituality is usually affiliated to religious beliefs and practices and norms and values. However, everyone has a spirit in them, and I am very sure that we all recognize that we are made of body, spirit, and soul. So each one of us has a spirit. Whether you are religious or not, you are spiritual. You are a spiritual being. The people who are helped to go into yoga, that activity of yoga, of meditation, is actually trying to make use of our spirituality, because each one of us has a spirit deep-seated within, and that spirituality can lead us to places. It can lead us to explore ourselves and different things. It is also a form of reflection, and so for many, spirituality is an awareness of something greater than ourselves. That is why when people are going into yoga, it seems as if they are going into another world and reaching out to some form of supernatural being that is then taking you around. It may actually seem like you have gone to a certain heaven of yourself and you are exploring it, and then you can come back to your body, to this world that we all share, and then you can narrate your escapade. So spirituality relates to adult learning through meaning making, in the sense that spirituality is one of those ways people construct knowledge and meaning through this notion of exploring your inner being. So what is important here is that as adult educators, we should recognize and acknowledge that the learners that we deal with have a spiritual dimension, as human beings. They all have a spiritual dimension to their lives, which is connected to how we create meaning in our relationships with others. In other words, this is it is in our living and loving, and we need to recognize this as we are dealing with them. That what we are dealing with is not only concerned with the brain, but goes beyond the brain, which we have just seen that it is part of the body, to another context of the spirit. Personally, I don't know where I can locate the spirit, where it resides in a person, but every one of us probably knows and can explore where our spirit is. Adults therefore come to a learning context with meaning making agenda, even if it is not articulated directly that we have come with a meaning making agenda. So even when we are in a conference and someone is speaking, we are trying to construct meaning from what they are saying. And our spirituality has an influence on how we make that meaning. And that is why different people will come out with different meanings from the same articulations that may have been made, or from the same experiences that may have been faced. And lastly, meaning making is the process of knowledge construction, a process that uses images and symbols, which often come from the deepest core of our being and can be accessed and manifested through art, music, or other creative work. So we can see that spirituality is quite broad and goes beyond just what we always reflect on when we are talking about learning. Of course, we have the symbols that we use, which may also comprise the tools that we are using, the modes or the avenues that we are using for learning, but it also goes into those other aspects that have a connotation to our inner being. We know very well that art speaks to the soul, and then we always say that music is food for the soul, and so all that craft of creativity has something that it influences on the learning of adults. So that will be it for now. I think that gives us quite an amount to reflect on. I will encourage you to continue your reflection on what we have talked about, and we shall be sharing some of the works that we can read and appreciate more deeply about these theories of learning. Remember, this is an overview which we shall complete in the first 30 minutes of the next lecture, and then probably have a discussion thereafter. So most of next lecture we shall be having a discussion. We shall just have a little bit of lecture on completing with the Western, non-Western theories of learning, adult learning, and then we shall go into discussions from our reading. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you again in the next meeting.